Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's your boy, Delightful Kiss Boy, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to win Buckshot Roulette multiplayer. When it comes out, it's not out quite yet, but it's coming out very, very soon, which I'm extremely excited about because I've been waiting for this thing for like months. I think the last update came out in like April. So I'm on the edge of my seat. I cannot wait for this to happen. Now, you may be asking yourself, but Delightful Kiss Boy, how are you going to teach me how to win Buckshot Roulette multiplayer when it's not even out yet? How do you know what the strategies are? How do you even know how it works? Well, some videos were released today of gameplay footage of multiplayer. Some people apparently got early access to the multiplayer beta or something like that, and they've uploaded footage that I've watched extensively. I've scrubbed it all. I've compiled the information in my head when I should have been working today. I was goofing off at work watching Buckshot Roulette, but who can blame me, am I right? So I've compiled the information, and I've actually come to some startling conclusions about what I think the best strategy is going to be to win multiplayer. So stick around if that sounds interesting to you. Consider subscribing because I make a bunch of videos like this about all sorts of games of probability. I got my channel started pretty much on Buckshot Roulette, so I'm going to make more about it when multiplayer comes out. So it'll be a lot of fun. Anyway, let's get into it. What are the details about multiplayer? So you can see here I got a screen grab from Fox Play, which is a YouTube channel that has a video of gameplay footage of multiplayer. So the first thing is, it is dropping October 31st, Halloween Day. So I can guarantee you there's going to be some trick-or-treaters coming up and knocking on my door, and they ain't going to get shit because I'm going to be too busy playing this fucking game. I don't have time to hand out Reese's Pieces to the neighborhood kiddos. Fuck them. I'm going to shoot my friends with a shotgun. All right? Now, the game, multiplayer, can be played with 2 to 4 players. So we saw in the Steam update recently that you can play with 4 players, but it is confirmed that you can start the game with fewer than 4 players. So you can do 1v1, 3-player games, 4-player games, lots of different configurations. There are 3 rounds that you play. It's similar to the traditional mode, the campaign mode. It's similar to a gauntlet in endless mode. But basically you get money as you continue playing through the rounds if you win. And then the winner is determined at the end of all 3 rounds. I'll get into how I think that's determined later in the presentation, but that's generally how it works. There are also 2 new items that have been introduced. There's the Jammer, which you can see over here, also from Fox Play, another YouTube channel, or the same YouTube channel actually. And this other one, which is from a different YouTube channel called Cat Play, which is a coincidence, that also has footage of Buckshot Roulette multiplayer. And this one over here, this is the remote. So let's talk about these new items. Let's learn what they do. The Jammer is essentially like multiplayer handcuffs. So handcuffs in the original game, for those who don't know, was an item that you could use to handcuff the dealer, or the dealer could use it on you, and you'd skip your next turn. The Jammer works exactly the same way, but it's set up for more than 1v1. So you pull up the Jammer, you select one of these 3 quadrants up here, and then you lock it down, and then they skip their turn. So pretty straightforward. Now the other one is the remote. It's kind of like an Uno reverse card. So if you played Uno, that's the card that switches the turn order. So if you're going clockwise, you use the remote, and then the turn order goes counterclockwise after that. You don't get an extra turn, but the guy who went before you is the next to go, and the guy who would go after you gets screwed and goes last now. So it's an interesting item. I'll get into what I think about it later, but that's what it does. It's interesting. The other thing is, as far as I can tell, 2 items have been removed from the item pool for multiplayer. The first one's handcuffs, because it's been replaced with the Jammer, so it's pretty obvious. But the other one is bad medicine, which I'm also pretty happy about, because bad medicine is very bad, as the name would imply. That's the one where if you use it in endless mode with the new update, there's a 50-50 chance of you, I think, gaining 2 versus losing 1 health. So pretty bad, but it's been removed from the item pool for multiplayer. So let's talk about how multiplayer works. We got this big, beautiful octagonal table. There's a shotgun in the middle on a Lazy Susan, and it's divided up into quadrants. Each of you and your buds is going to get a quadrant. That's your domain, your realm. That's where your life counter is going to be, and that's where your items are going to go. So at the beginning of the round, what you're going to do is you're going to reach under the table and whip out one of your loot crates here. And from the loot crate, you're going to pull out 2 to 4 items, it appears. And those are just items that we know and love from the base game, plus 2 additional new items, as I mentioned before. After you've done this, you're going to put your loot crate back under the table for later use. Now, the next thing that's revealed to you is the loadout, which is going to tell you the number of lives and blanks that are going to go into the gun. The loader looks a little more slick than this one, but I was too lazy to animate that, so this will have to do. All right, once you play the game, you'll see what I mean. It's pretty cool looking. So, after this, after the loadout is revealed, play will actually begin. So the first person to go in the first round will be randomly determined, and it's going to be the person that the butt of the shotgun is pointing towards. So it's going to be this guy over here. Now this guy, he can use any number of items similar to the base game as he wants, but this guy is just going to go straight for the shotgun, like the degenerate he is. He's going to yank it from the middle here, and he's going to choose who he wants to shoot. He can shoot himself, or he can shoot any of the 3 other players that he wants. So he's going to decide he wants to shoot this guy over here, and boom, he fires, he got a hit. So we remove 1 live shell from the gun, this guy takes 1 damage, and then that's the end of this guy's turn. He's going to return the shotgun to the middle, and it's going to get rotated clockwise, pointing to this guy, and now this guy's the guy that the gun is, the butt is pointing at. He's got a butt in his face, and he's going to be the next person to go. And play will continue until everybody's dead except for 1 guy, and he's the guy who's going to win the round. So, given that there are 3 rounds, how do you win the entire game? Well, you get money for each round that you win. So once you win a round, a briefcase, will be presented to you, similar to the one in this picture here, and it's going to get added to your total. Whoever has the most money at the end of the game is going to be the winner. And it seems that the amount of money that you win increases every round. So that means that either the person who wins round 3 will always win, as I'm assuming, because that's what I've seen in these videos. It's always the person who wins round 3 who wins, but I'm guessing it's more likely the second option, which is that if you win the first 2 rounds, you'll win, or if you win round 3 with nobody else winning the first 2 rounds, right? Because the total amount of money from the first 2 rounds, if you win both of them, should be greater than the amount that you win in round 3. Otherwise, it wouldn't really make much sense. It would just be whoever wins round 3 wins the whole thing, and it would be pointless to play the first 2 rounds. So I'm assuming that's how it works. All right, let's get into some details that I've observed to help us formulate a strategy to win this gosh darn thing, why don't you? I don't know why I became a Minnesotan there, but it just kind of happened. We're going to roll with it. Now, these are things that I've observed from the limited amount of gameplay footage I've seen from the videos uploaded. So some of these are kind of extrapolations or assumptions, but I will correct the record after the game comes out if any of these are wrong. But this is what I've seen. So I see that people have between 3 and 5 health in each round of multiplayer. In the base game, in endless mode, it's between 2 and 4 health, but now it's 3 and 5. Also, you only get 2 to 4 items per loadout in multiplayer, rather than 2 to 5 as in endless mode. There also seems to be an item cap, like a cap on jammers and remotes only. So in endless mode, in the base game, the existing game, there are item caps on multiple different items. So for example, you can only have 2 adrenaline, or grabblers as I like to call them, in endless mode. There's kind of a glitch that sometimes happens where you can have more, but the intention is that you can have at most 2. I've seen in multiplayer that there appears to be people that get up to 3 adrenaline at a time. However, I've not seen anyone have more than 1 jammer or remote at a time, so I'm assuming there's a cap on those 2 items, which makes sense, because having 2 remotes would be pretty useless, and jammers are pretty powerful, so they may want to limit the number that people can have at any given time. Now also, there seem to be 2 to 8 shells per loadout. and there's a maximum of 4 live or 4 blank. So you can't have 5 live or 5 blank, for example. The other thing I'm seeing is it looks like the number of blanks in a loadout can only exceed the number of lives by 1. So that means that if you have 3 lives, the maximum number of blanks appears to be 4. I have not seen any instances of a 2 live, 4 blank loadout. However, now, unlike in endless mode, where this was not possible, you can have 3 live, 1 blank loadouts. So there will always be at least one of each type, 1 live and 1 blank, but you can have 2 or 3 more lives than there are blanks in multiplayer, which is interesting. So there's a lot more live shells on average, which I'll get into the strategy implications of that in a bit. The other thing is that the turn order continues through loadouts. In endless mode, what happens is as soon as you reach the end of a loadout, when somebody fires the last shell, the next loadout will begin, you'll get your new items, and then the player is always the one who goes first. So even if you were the one who took the last shot in the last loadout, you get to go first, the dealer always goes second. The dealer's at a disadvantage. In multiplayer, that is not the case. The last person, so basically the next person who would have gone in the previous loadout, they're the ones who start the new loadout. The other thing is, it seems that the player who died first in a round seems to be the person who gets to go first in the next round. That's what I've observed. I haven't seen anything that contradicts that so far. So, there are also some slight variations with multiple player counts, so like 2 versus 3 or 4. Excuse me. I'm seeing that remotes don't seem to appear in 2-player, which makes sense because they'd be useless. It doesn't really matter if you're going clockwise or counterclockwise when there are only 2 players because you're just alternating. So it doesn't do anything. I haven't seen it show up in a 2-player game. Additionally, it looks like shell counts potentially adjust based on the number of players. It seems like there are more instances of 7 to 8 shells in a loadout in the 4-player games that I've seen, and more instances of 2 to 4 shells in 2-player games. For example, in the 4-player games I saw, I didn't see any instances of 2 shells, aka 1 live, 1 blank. And that's really all I noticed. There may be some other slight variations between 2 and 4 players, but that's what I'm seeing. Now, the other thing I want to talk about real quick is how good are the new items? Because they're new, so how good are they going to be? Now, the jammer seems to be pretty good in 3 and 4 player. You can keep your most aggroed player locked down. The person who's gunning for you, skip them, right? They keep shooting you, just skip them and then try to shoot them when they can't fight back. So it's pretty good, but it's very good in 1v1. It's just like handcuffs. They skip their turn and nobody else benefits from it because there's only one other person. When you're playing in 3 or 4 players, when you lock somebody down, that benefits everybody because you're removing a turn from their opponents. Everybody is each other's opponents, so anything bad that you do to any particular player helps everybody else to some extent. So it's pretty good in 3 to 4 players, very good in 1v1. Now, the remote is conversely pretty fucking bad. It's cool, it's like an Uno reverse, but if you think about it, it's not very good. And it's because really the only person who benefits from this is the person who just went before you. It just screws over the person who would have gone after you, and they're probably going to get fucking pissed off at you. You don't get an extra turn. The person who went before you basically gets an extra turn, and the person across from you and you, it's just kind of neutral. It basically does nothing. But in this case, it took up an item slot for you. Now, it also becomes useless when it gets down to 1v1. As I said earlier, it doesn't seem to appear in a 1v1 game, but in a 4-player game where you eliminate people down to 1v1, if you haven't used the remote by then, it's just going to clog up your inventory because it does nothing, because everybody else is dead. So what I would say is if there's an item cap of 1 on the remote, like I think there is, which we'll have to confirm after the multiplayer update comes out, try to keep it around until running up against 8 items. What I mean by that is keep it around and don't use it because it's basically useless, so that you don't pull another one out of the box until you start to get up close to the limit of 8 items. So that way you can get more useful items out of the box on average. Now, some basic strategic tips that I've got for you before I get into the juicy stuff. The really interesting stuff that I've deduced. So hold on for a sec, but these are just kind of basic things that I got to cover. The first thing is you want to use items early, probably. So that's because there are items out there like adrenaline and the jammer and the remote that can either steal your items or prevent you from taking a turn. So if you don't use your items up front, there's a chance you may never get to use them, including if you die before you get to use your items. So particularly because of adrenaline, you want to use your good items immediately, or else people are just going to steal them. The exception to that is maybe adrenaline, because nobody can steal adrenaline. But still, you probably want to use your adrenaline up front to deprive people of the ability to use their good items downstream from you, as well as avoiding the pitfalls of dying before you get to use it and getting skipped by like a jammer, for example. Because you're going to be kind of scary if you got a bunch of adrenaline and somebody might just want to skip you so you don't steal their items. So use your items pretty much as soon as you can when they're useful. Obviously, if you have cigarettes, you may not want to smoke them if you haven't taken any damage. The other thing is, this is pretty obvious, count shells, because now it's more important than ever, because it matters now if the last shell is blank. And that's because, as I said, the flow of, I'll get to this point in a sec, but the flow of play is that through loadouts, the turn order is persisted. And that means that if you shoot yourself on a blank, that means that you get to take the first turn of the new loadout. So before, it didn't really matter if you shot the dealer with the last shell and it was a blank, because you get to go first on the new loadout. But now you got to keep track of that so that you can go first. You don't get your turn skipped in the new loadout. If you know the next one is blank, shoot yourself every time rather than shooting somebody else. And so in order to figure that out, you're going to have to count shells. It's not displayed for you. Now the other thing here is you're almost always going to be shooting your opponents when you don't know what the shell is. So what I mean by that is if you use a magnifying glass or a burner phone and you learn what the next shell is going to be, or you deduce it by counting shells, then you can maybe shoot yourself if you know the next one is a blank. But if you don't know, do not shoot yourself pretty much ever, with some exceptions, which I'll get to in a second. Some juicy exceptions. Especially though, because there are higher live counts now. So it's not like in the base game where there's a lot of 2 and 3 loadouts and 3 and 4, 2 and 4, etc., etc. Now it's only going to be, there's usually going to be more lives than there are blanks. And then, as I said, there's going to be some circumstances I'll talk about later where you may actually want to die, and we'll get to that. Now, items that you don't want to steal basically ever with adrenaline, which adrenaline is going to be your best item hands down. It's just the best item on the board, and you deprive that person of their best item. But items that you don't want to steal basically ever with adrenaline is going to be remotes and beer. Remotes, as I said, are pretty fucking useless for you. They're good if somebody else uses them after, like the turn after you've gone. Then they're good for you. So you want somebody else to be using them. The other thing is beer. Now, beer appears to me to be very underwhelming in multiplayer. Now, one of the benefits of beer in the base game, right? So in endless mode, is that you can chew through the loadout quicker and get to the end of it because you always start the new loadout. But now that's not the case anymore. So chewing through a loadout really doesn't help you much. The only thing that beer really does is it gives you a little bit more info. But now, most of the time, you just want to be shooting your opponents anyway. And there's going to be more lives than blanks, most of the time anyway. So it's not really doing much. So I don't see why you'd waste an adrenaline on it. Just don't steal beer. Now, the other items that you usually don't want to steal are going to be inverters. So inverters don't seem to be very useful if you're blind using them, because there are going to be fewer situations where there are more blanks than there are lives as compared to endless mode. Now, if you know what the next shell is going to be a blank, then go ahead and steal an inverter to get a guaranteed 1. But sometimes, a lot of times there's going to be better options even if you know that the next one's blank. Just go through it and then steal a handsaw, for example, and deal a guaranteed 2 or a probable 2. The other thing is burner phone. So especially in like a 3 or 4 player game, it's going to be less predictable what shell you end up getting to. So the burner phone, for those who don't know, tells you what a future shell is in the loadout. It's not like the magnifying glass that tells you what the exact next shell is. So the burner phone is going to tell you about a shell lower in the loadout, but it's not even likely that by the time you get to that shell, it's going to be your turn, because so many people are going to be taking turns. Now, the burner phone, the beer actually goes relatively well with the burner phone because it lets you chew through the loadout to get to those shells that you know about, but that's really the only time that you're going to maybe want to steal a burner phone. I'd say usually there's going to be better targets, like, a jammer is going to be a great target, a magnifying glass, a handsaw, anything like that is probably going to take priority over the burner phone, or cigarettes if you've taken damage. Now, let's get into the juicy stuff. I've covered the basics. A lot of them are fairly obvious. Don't shoot yourself. But, this is the surprising stuff that, if my assumptions are correct, are going to help you win more, that have more to do with kind of game theory. So, the first thing we got to ask ourselves is, you have the option of shooting anybody at the table. There's no restrictions on who you get to shoot. So who do we shoot? Right? It's hard to deduce that just at face value, because there, you got yourself, you got 3 options, and shooting yourself is usually not going to be right. So let's think about it. It seems to be best to go first in this game. You get to use items before somebody else could steal them. You can't get skipped because you're going first. You avoid dying early before you even get to go, for example, so you on average get more turns if you go first in the turn order for a round. So the second best is going second. So basically, the sooner you go in the turn order, the better off I think that you're going to be. I haven't been able to run the numbers. When the game actually comes out and I get all of the details nailed down, I'm going to try to do some simulations to figure out if this is actually true. But my assumption is, and this isn't, this holds true in multiple games, is that going earlier is going to be better because you get, on average, more turns. So going second is the second best thing. Now, who gets to go first? Well, in the first round, it's random. It's just, up to the luck of the draw. But later, it's the first to die. So the first person to die in the previous round is the person who gets to go first in later rounds. So that means that if you kill the person that's going before you first, then in the next round, you get to go second because they get to go first. Now, this can change, obviously, if somebody uses a remote, but as I've established, remotes are relatively useless. And you can just adjust your target as the turn order switches throughout the loadout. So ideally, you want to kill the person who goes before you in the loadout, so that in the next round, you'll get to go you'll get to go second. Now, hold up, though. All right, because going first is the best. So let's think about this. I think, as far as I can tell, you win by either winning the first 2 rounds or winning round 3 if no one else won both of the first 2 rounds. So either you win rounds 1 and 2, or you win round 3 when nobody else won rounds 1 and 2. So that means that if somebody wins round 1 and it isn't us, they need to die in round 2, or else we just can't win. We go to round 3, but the guy has already won. There's no point in doing round 3 because he won round 1 and 2 in a row. So even though you get more money in round 3, he's got more money than you, and he's going to win the whole thing. So In round 2, you got to target, you got to kill the person who won round 1. But the other thing is, if we didn't win round 1, we only care about winning round 3. We definitely don't want the same guy who won round 1 to win again in round 2, but we also don't really care if we win round 2 because it doesn't matter at that point. Because even if we win round 2, we still have to win round 3 in order to win because it's the one that pays out the most money. So, does that mean then, and you may be arriving at the same conclusion that I've arrived at, you may want to die immediately in round 2, very early on. Why is that? This is only if you didn't win round 1, of course. If you won round 1, try to go for the double, round 1, round 2 win, and then you don't have to even worry about round 3, you win the whole thing. But if you didn't win round 1, you probably want to try to die first in round 2 so that you get to go first on round 3 and have an advantage. Because going first seems to be the best thing to do in a given round, to have the ability to go first before everybody else goes. You get more turns. So if you didn't win round 1, you gotta throw round 2. It's a little bit risky though, because if everybody did this, if everybody tries to themselves immediately, the player who won round 1 may win round 2 and then they win the whole thing. But we're greedy. We're greedy. We want other people to worry about it. We want to be the ones who die first. And as soon as we die first, then everybody else logically should turn their attention to the guy who's going to win the game if he wins that round. So whoever sells first, they're going to be at an advantage in round 3, but then everybody else who wasn't able to do it quickly enough, they're going to have to be the ones to take care of the person who won in round 1. So we're going to try to ourselves as quickly as possible in round 2 if we don't win round 1, which is an interesting strategy and an unintuitive one. So, in conclusion, this is Delightful Kiss Boy's certified strategy to win at Buckshot Roulette multiplayer. In round 1, target the player who goes before you, because if you win round 1, that means you go second in round 2. If you don't win round 1, try to speedrun life, as a euphemism, in round 2. You want to be the first one to die so that you can go first in round 3. If somebody else dies before you in round 2, so if they were the winner, chicken dinner, and they get to go first, in round 3, then you have to target the winner of round 1 so that you have any chance of winning. Even though this other guy was the one who got lucky and gets to go first in round 3, the one that actually matters, you still got to do the dirty work of taking down the guy who's about to win it all. All right? Thank you. That's pretty much all I have for now. I'm going to get more details when the actual game comes out, but I will see you all October 31st. I'm very excited. I think it'd be fun to try to play with some viewers, so let me know if you'd be interested in that, playing against DKB, but it should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Hope you all are too. I hope you can use this this strategy to get some W's, use it for evil. Try to, just fucking clown on some bitches, all right? Have fun. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.